Welcome to the Atheist in Recovery podcast, where we talk about finding hope in recovery. And now your host, Dr. Adina Silvestri.
Hello, atheists in recovery land, and welcome to episode 21 of the Atheists in Recovery podcast. And today I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Tarman. Dr. Tarman and I talk all about food and sugar addiction. And I think that you'll find Dr. Tarman's early spiritual background very interesting, in that she was in a convent for a few years in Germany, and she talks about how that impacted her sense of self, but she also talks about her journey through addiction and how she would rely on her early spiritual upbringing to help her with connection and a belief in something, whatever that thing was at the time. And how she found that was just incredibly important for her and for the people that she serves. And then we talk about many things, but we definitely talk about the neurobiology of addiction, which is always my favorite part. And yeah, I mean, she's a wealth of knowledge, and I hope that you glean some insight from this. Okay, on to my guest, Dr. Vera Tarman. She is a medical addictions physician in Toronto. She's an author and speaker and works with people who want to break their dependence on unhealthy foods. Over the last 20 years, she has been the medical director at a clinic that has served more than 10,000 patients, including 1,000 with food addictions. She is the author of Food Junkies, Recovery from Food Addictions, and its second edition. Her audiences have included more than 50,000 healthcare experts, medical professionals, and others who learn how to break their food addiction through community and peer support. As a recovering food addict, she has maintained a 100-pound weight loss for more than 12 years and has been clean from sugar and flour for 8 years. You can join Dr. Tarman's closed Facebook group, Sugar Free for Life support group, I'm Sweet Enough, and grab her free cheat sheet, 9 Sneaky Ways to Quit Sugar, Stop Cravings, and Prevent Withdrawal at her website, addictionsunplugged.com. Okay, here we go. Dr. Vera Tarman, welcome to the show.
Hello.
So I want to start our conversation by inquiring about your spiritual background from childhood. Just give us a little background there.
Okay. Well, my background is a little bit complex. I grew up, my first 3 years of my life, I actually grew up in a convent because I was born in Germany, and I was born in 1957. And in those days, there wasn't a welfare system in the way that there is now. It was basically the churches that did the various types of work. Like in this case, I lived in a convent that was for mothers and children. So I lived there for the first 3 years of my life, and then I came to Canada as a 3-year-old. And I have no recollection of that time period, but I know that it was heavily saturated by convents, like Catholic Church mythology and stories and all that sort of stuff. And then after that, went to Catholic schools, because that's what Catholics did in those days. Mm-hmm. And even until I was 17 years old, had in my background, I'm going to be a nun one day. And I think somewhere in my teens, I just thought, no, what am I thinking? It was like this thing in the background that finally popped up as, that's just ridiculous. That's absurd. I have no interest in doing that. But because of that, it was always in the background as an understanding about, I guess, the church. And a lot of people in my generation will talk about how they hate the church, they hate dogma, they hate priests. I mean, there's so much bad press about that stuff now. Mm. And I certainly remember getting strapped and disciplined by nuns. They were pretty unpleasant people sometimes. But I have a soft spot in my heart, nevertheless, because I must have met some that were very nice to me. So I don't have a sense of church is bad, but I do have a sense of, I don't believe in church. I believe in the idea of myth and symbols and rituals, but not actually that it's there's a God behind it. I don't have a knee-jerk negative reaction that a lot of people do, but I'm also define myself as an agnostic. And I think that in my teens and childhood, I was always asking questions like, how is it possible that, we eat this God, Jesus, and he's supposed to be our God. Like I asked those and never got good answers. So I always developed a sense of, I don't really believe this stuff, but I nevertheless saw the power of it, both good and bad. So my relationship now from then, and it's continued on.
Oh yeah.
When I was a teenager, I finally decided I'm not going to be a nun, but I was very attracted to. Then I grew up in the 70s and 80s when everyone was going to India and they were going to meet a guru and go to ashrams and all that sort of thing. And so I went to India in search for a guru and met some gurus. For those people who are aware of who was around in those days, there was a guy named Sri Rajneesh. He was the guy who later became known as Osho. And if you do any kind of higher power spiritual readings now, you'll find a lot of stuff on Osho still to this day, even though he's long since died. But I went there to the ashrams that were there in India. And again, I had that sense of there's something very powerful about this concept of human nature seeming to need group connection and a belief in something. But the actual people that we believe, I found very hard to buy into. Like the guy, Rajneesh, he had like 99 Rolls Royces. I don't know if you heard of him, but he was the guy with the 99 Rolls Royces. And then later we heard of other people like Jim Jones and all those guys who started off with this amazing pull, but then ended up themselves being like not gods by any means.
No, the opposite of, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. So I was always very interested in human nature and my nature of being drawn to this, but not actually, never really finding something there. But so it was always like there's the search, but the answers are never worthy of the search. So now I see it as human nature is, we are built to be seekers. I see myself as a seeker that has not found something. And I don't think I'm meant to find something. I think I'm always meant to ask the question.
Yeah.
So that's why I see my spirituality today, as somebody who's open to further questioning.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you describe yourself as a seeker.
And I think a lot of people, agnostics and I don't know about atheists, because atheists have decided that there is nothing, but the people in between that haven't gotten that far are really seekers. And I remember reading, finding the whole literature about agnosticism as being more faith-driven than the faith stuff, because the faith stuff was like, here's the answer. There were no more questions, like, here's the answer. So I found that just very interesting.
Yeah.
Wanted to.
No. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I see that too in my work. Even though people will self-identify as an atheist, they will go to church. Yeah. And they'll pray, especially, in times of just complete and utter despair. And some of that early childhood stuff doesn't actually leave.
Yeah. But I think because I'm assuming that at some point we're going to talk about 12-step stuff. I don't know. But
yes, we are.
Yeah. One of the things that I see that's similar to what I'm talking about in 12-step is that one of the fundamental principles of 12-step is surrender.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter who you surrender to, a higher power of your own understanding. But it's that concept of surrender, which is like the concept of seeking. Who cares what we're actually finding? It's the seeking and the surrendering that I think is the magic of recovery and of good life.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about your book, which is the reason that you're here today. And something that I found so interesting was the very beginning of the book. You say that you and your co-author, you're both food addicts, and you struggled to control your addiction through diet pills, diet doctors, and even diet candy. And I thought, wow, this is something that so many of us are struggling with. So I wonder if you could take us on that recovery journey. Well,
it was, that was with Phil Werdell, and he's a person that has done a lot of, he's like a pioneer in America, in the U.S. with food addiction. Like he's been writing since the 70s and 80s. There's a few people who have been speaking they're kind of lost now because they spoke then and we're getting more heard now, but as they're kind of not retiring, but I guess retiring. But he he and his story and mine too were, solely trying to figure out how to manage this addiction to food. And oftentimes a previous addiction or a co-addiction, I mean, just addiction itself. Yeah. But food being one that is just so powerful and yet so unrecognized, like so easily dismissed. And there are so many solutions that he found, like diet pills, diet clubs, diet gurus, diet books, like so many ways to capture a solution that looks like it's going to work and then it doesn't work. And he had that experience and I had that experience. And then we both came to a common solution, which was, oh my God, this is an addiction. It's not a diet. It's not just being overweight. It's not just pigging out all the time and not being able to control ourselves. We're dealing with an addiction. And both of us coming from different backgrounds, but an addiction background going, well, hey, if it's an addiction, let's use the tools of addiction like 12-step and the slogans and all the stuff that comes with recovery in addiction that doesn't come from the diet world or the obesity world. And let's use those tools, which seems like an obvious thing to do, but to try to sell that to other clinicians was the reason for the book and for us teaming up. Then also to try to sell it to people who are not, I mean, like, I'm guessing the fact that you and I are talking, you must have felt intuitively that this was your story too, or something about it rang true for you.
Well, so many of the people that I work with, so I have a private practice in Richmond and I work with individuals that are struggling with substance abuse.
Yes.
But I also find that the food is something that they pick up once they lay the substance down.
Yes, exactly. So people who have already dealt with that struggle know what I'm talking about. But in the larger population, where people, they see that struggle, addiction, as something stigmatic, and it's not them. It's the crack addict. It's the alcoholic. It's the smoker. They don't see themselves as being that same thing, having that same phenomena. So the book was also to kind of break that boundary, or not bound, that barrier, to say, hey, it's you too. It's not just them on the street with the bags and they're, huffing in the corner somewhere. That's you. What they're doing is the same thing you're doing when you open up the fridge late at night and go, what do I want? And an hour later you're stuffed and you feel sick. It's not any different. So the book was a way to break that barrier and make food as pertinent a discussion. Like don't dismiss this thing as being silly. It's a real thing, in the same way as trying to quit smoking, the same way as trying to quit drugs. Yeah.
And why do you think that people are so resistant to this idea of food being an addiction?
Well, because I guess what I'm trying to say is that the people that you work with, that I work with, who are already addicted, don't have a problem with that.
Right,
I think they're relieved. But the other people, it's like, I'm not an addict. Like it's stigmatic. You don't want to take on this thing that I'm the same as this person who's on the street. No, I'm not. But yes, you are. So I think there's a sense of stigma, especially if the person's already dealing with obesity. They got the stigma of being overweight. You're going to add the stigma of addiction on top of that. People don't like that. It's like yet another burden to carry. And then the other thing is if I convince somebody that they're addicted to something, the implication then is that if you want to get better, you're going to have to stop doing it. And no sugar addict is willingly going to stop their favorite bread and their favorite dessert at night.
Yeah,
all that means you got to stop all that. And it's like people go, what? Are you kidding? No way. Okay, a little bit. I'll cut down. But I'm sure in your work that there are some people who cannot cut down. It just doesn't work.
It just doesn't work.
No, it just doesn't work. And, we live in a world of moderation and harm reduction, and it's all about, you don't have to, we don't want to scare the person away. So it just becomes very muddy on all fronts, Yeah. So that's what the book is. It's a way to give some validation to this perspective. And even to this day in where are we now?
2019.
Yeah, 2019. Right. Even to this day, when I went to the publisher, I mean, they were happy to do a second edition. But when I said, okay, now we got to get some promotion here, get me on the radio so I can talk about it in Canada. In Canada, that would be CBC, and CBC is like Canadian. It's a great venue. And they said, no, they're not interested. It's a niche topic. It's a topic people don't want to talk about. So even now, that's still today, like this year, we're still battling this view.
Wow.
Of, how can sugar be addictive? It's frustrating.
It is frustrating, but I think that you're right. When you talk to people who are struggling and they don't understand why moderation isn't working for them, and you bring up this idea of addiction, it's like it's like, oh my God, there's hope. Now I know what to do next.
Yes, but you won't get there. That person doesn't get there until they've accepted that, oh, this could actually be an addiction. It sounds like you've got to jump that hurdle, and it's a hard hurdle to jump.
It is a hard hurdle to jump.
Yeah.
So what are some things that you can share that helped you sort of jumping that hurdle?
In my case and in Phil's case, so like we said, we tried the diet books, we tried blah, blah, blah. Like when you've reached the end of the line and there just is nothing left, it's like any addiction. You talk about the willingness to surrender. You've got to, I guess we say you hit bottom. You don't have anything left. I've tried everything that I can do. People say the gift of desperation. There's a version of God, gift of desperation. You have to have a level of desperation that you're willing to try this horrendous idea of abstinence.
Yeah.
And I am an addict. And until, if there's any room to maneuver to say, maybe I can still control this, that person's going to go there. It's kind of like they got to reach that point. And that's what happened to me. When I turned 50, I had reached the point where I was just so, people say morally bankrupt, just exhausted from every attempt that I possibly could, that I was willing to say, okay, I'll try this. And like, oh my God, it was so easy once I did that. And I don't know what that's actually the spiritual moment is when you let go of trying to do it yourself and let it go to another. When I teach in class, I say with step two traditionally being, I came to believe in a higher power, which a lot of people don't like that concept. I always say, then forget the higher power. Just came to believe in another perspective than your own. You are not the only one making the rules here, and your rules aren't working. There are other rules. Try those. That's step two, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree. In my work as well, I bring in the spiritual connection, a higher power, someone living or dead. It could be your dead grandmother, the person that always had your best interests in mind. Well, what would she say to you at this point?
Yeah, that's right.
So I think that maybe talking a little bit about the neurochemistry of addiction would be helpful. And then I want to jump to AA.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Well, the neurochemistry is, you were saying a little bit earlier, people are really relieved to hear that there is something other than just their own poor willpower. In the book, I describe this, I think, quite well in a couple of chapters, and often in my teaching will show that this whole tension, this whole torturous struggle between trying to stop, I want to stop, and I can't stop, that there's actually a neurological explanation for this whole thing. It's not just you being mentally weird. There's an explanation for this. And the explanation is that the impulsive need to feel better or to feel good or to not feel bad if you're feeling uncomfortable is hooked to what we call the limbic system, which is essentially our emotional center, which is kissing cousins to our instinctual responses. I do things that I like because they save my life. And I don't like things and I'm afraid of things that are dangerous to me. That's how we're wired. Nobody wants to do something that's dangerous because it's dangerous. You may get a thrill from it, but ultimately you're cautious. We're built to be afraid to not want things that are fearful and to want things that are helpful. Yeah. And addiction is a manipulation of that so that good things become too good to the point of danger. But this part of my brain doesn't get that danger piece. It just gets this is really good. And that is the neurochemistry. The thing that makes us want to do things is dopamine. That's our motivator. It's the reason why I want to, get up and read a book or walk in a beautiful field or talk to people. It's dopamine. And if I take a drug that will enhance dopamine or eat food that will enhance dopamine, it's like going on mega walks and meeting mega people, and it's all that stuff. And it's to the point where it's far beyond what my body and brain can manage because it's too much. But this part of my brain can't see that. That's another part of the brain that sees the consequences. And this limbic system, which is part of our non-thinking, almost animalistic part, is always more powerful than the intellectual, rational part, which kicks in later, seconds later, So when you are tortured between something, it's parts of the brain fighting against each other, but one is already, we say hijacked.
We do.
Yeah, so that it's even more powerful than normal, you know. So if you put a gun in my face, I'm going to be afraid. Even if you say, don't worry, I'm not going to shoot. I'm still afraid. And addiction is just making that gun is really big. It's like super big. And so my ability to even hope to say anything else is trampled on. So we're essentially seeing, it's very explainable from a brain biology point of view. And the whole idea about abstinence is it settles some of that hijacking. It eventually, I don't want to say it erases, but it makes the hijacking less and less and less, so that you're given back your natural, whatever control you have. You actually have more control when you're abstinent. I mean, not if you use, you can't control and use. No. You lose control. But your ability to be rational and make choices, good choices, is enhanced once you're no longer hijacked.
Yeah.
And it's all biology.
Yeah. And so are you saying then that when you're abstinent from a food, the longer that you can stay abstinent, the more your brain is sort of healing in that part of the brain? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I see it's the same as a diabetes or something. Like if you're a diabetic and you're now eating well and you're taking your meds and you're no longer eating a lot of crap and, your sugars normalize, you'll even look normal. You won't even feel like you're a diabetic anymore. You'll just live a normal life as long as you don't pick up sugar and stop doing your meds and all that. And similarly with addiction, like with diabetes, we call it insulin resistance, but you can live with an insulin resistant life by eating good food.
Yeah.
With addiction, you could almost say it's like a dopamine resistance. Something's happened to the dopamine chemistry, neurology. And as long as we live a normal life, not hungry, not angry, not lonely, not tired, halt, and we don't take drugs, and we live as moderately as we can, not with drugs, but I mean normal life, then you'll look normal. But the moment you add too much stress, add a drug in, do something, you don't have that ability to bounce back. You're back to being a diabetic, like immediately your sugars are off. In other words, your dopamine is off. We say one drink is too much and 100 is not enough. Well, one drink will put you off. One cheesecake will put you off.
Wow.
One super big fight or divorce or losing your job could put you off. It doesn't even have to be a substance. It can just be rude. So that's why a person in addiction, and we're going to talk about AA, that's why the recovery program is, the first step is stopping the drug. And then we got the whole other 11 steps to make sure that I can stay living a life that will make me feel normal. Because if I have a lot of resentments and all sorts of things, I'm not doing the work, as it were, then I'm going to pick up again. That's what we see.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I want to now talk about treatment. And so let's say that you find out that you are in fact addicted to food, sugar, whatever the thing is. Now what?
Well, step one, do you admit that you're powerless over sugar or whatever the food is? Because it may be more than sugar. A lot of times, depending on the level of addiction that a person is at, it doesn't stop at sugar. It can be flour, which is almost sugar. It breaks down into sugar pretty quickly. For some people, they can't have even grains. It's too much carbs. Like they have to do a low-carb food plan. And for some people, they even have to, if it's severe enough, because any addiction gets worse over time. Yeah. And if you've let it go for long enough, you may even have to weigh and measure your food because your ability to gauge when you're hungry and what's normal is lost because you've lost it, So depending on where you are on the line, and that's something that you would do with a counselor or a sponsor or a food coach or a dietitian who knows food addiction.
Yeah.
Then you would figure, okay, that is the level of abstinence I need to have. So you might get away with no sugar, whereas somebody else would have to say, well, I can't have sugar or flour or grains or even dairy. And, Mary over there, she can have dairy, but she can't have, whatever like that. And that's what I call my abstinence. That's step one. I'm going to call that my abstinence and I'm going to keep to it. And now, how do I live life in a world where there's drinking everywhere, smoking everywhere, vaping everywhere, eating candy everywhere? And that's where, the social supports, the peer support, the 12-step groups come into being. You go to an OA meeting, Overeaters Anonymous or Food Addicts Anonymous, and talk about how, you were at the party last night and they wanted to give you all sorts of booze and all sorts of, pumpkin pie or whatever it is. And how did I say no? Or tell me what I should do to say no. That's treatment. It's relapse prevention.
It is.
You got to identify what the trigger is, and then how do I protect myself from that?
Yeah, exactly. Because the addiction isn't ever about the substance, right? No. It's about something much more than that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you put down your substance, that's when you see. And food, it's so easy to pull aside. Like if I'm having a hard day, I don't smoke cigarettes anymore, so I can't pull out a cigarette. I don't drink anymore. I can't have a drink, but I can still have candy. At least in society, that's easy. But when you don't even have that, most people will say, like people who are in AA or CA will say, I'm clean, but they're still eating a ton of candy. And I want to say, yeah, wait till you stop that candy and then let's talk. Not to say that they're not clean, but they still don't know what that hole in the donut feels like because they're still filling it with candy. And it's been my experience in my work, like I work in a treatment center as well, with just generally drugs and alcohol. And the people who quit sugar and food are much more emotionally needy than the others. Why? Because they have nothing to hide. And the alcoholics and the cocaine users are still chomping on their Snickers bar and drinking pop, and they still got that little muffler or whatever it is. That's muffing them away from the sharp teeth of emotion. Whereas we got nothing. It's,
Yeah. Time to start seeking, right?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. And now we're moving into what do you do? It's been my experience. Seeking is enough. You don't have to have an answer. You don't have to have an answer to, what am I seeking? Is it God? It doesn't matter. But my experience is that when people, when I sit there and I go, is this guy going to make it? He's coming and he wants to do everything. And I think, is he going to make it? My hunch is that the person who's open to seeking is more likely to make it, because that seeking might come in the form of what work can I do that will help people? You have to know what it is. The fact that they're asking that question is a prognostic. It's a good prognostic indicator of success. The one that's just sitting there going, I don't know, and they're going to go home and watch Netflix tonight. Eventually, they're going to go home and call their old buddies and pick up their drug again. If that's my experience. I do think that there has to be something other than the person, which we call the higher power in AA, but it could be the higher purpose.
Anything.
What is my purpose? It could be writing a book. It could be writing a song. I don't care what it is, but it has to be something other than me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the perspective shift is huge.
Yes. Perspective shift. Okay. If the perspective is just on me, well, you know what? I know what works. Food.
I know it works. Yeah. Back to old habits.
Yeah. But food's not going to help you. If I want to help you and I eat, how's that going to help you? It's not. So I have to think of another solution. And it forces me, if I want to help others, it forces me to get outside of myself and my own needs.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much. I think this is probably a good place to end. Do you have any final words of wisdom for us?
Well, okay, if there's anybody listening thinking maybe I'm a food addict, I would say, first of all, please get my book, Food Junkies, Recovery from Food Addiction. But I want to say as a message of hope, because I don't know if that's clear in the book, that if you think, okay, maybe I am a food addict, but oh my God, how will I live without my substance tonight, my cheesecake, or for me, it used to be a tub of ice cream at night. And even before that, it used to be a bottle of wine. Like it didn't matter. It had to be something to get me through the evening into bed. I want to say that it is only a few weeks, a couple of weeks of discomfort, which you can get through a support group, and then it gets easier. So it's not like you're going to live the rest of your life feeling deprived. It's only a couple of weeks, and then the relief from the obsession will be bigger than the deprivation. So it doesn't take that long to feel good. That's the message I want to give. It doesn't take that long to feel good or to feel relief of the obsession. And I have a Facebook group called, if anybody wants support to quit sugar, that's called Sugar Free for Life, I'm Sweet Enough. And please friend me and then become part of the Facebook group. I think that doing a 12-step group is better, but it's a good way to dip your feet in and just hear what people are doing.
Yeah, I'll link to the Facebook group and the book in the show notes. Well, thanks so much for being on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Atheists in Recovery podcast. For more great info and to stay up to date, head over to atheistsandrecovery.com.